My name is Hannah, and I'm a patient at Brentworth Hospital, and something horrible is happening. That morning I was laying in my bed when I heard a loud ruckus out in the hall. I was still in my pyjamas as I gingerly lowered myself into my wheelchair. I rolled myself out into the hall, only to see two men pushing a stretcher out of my neighbour Jen's room. On top of the stretcher lay a body bag. I gasped, causing one of the nurses to notice me. She cleared her throat nervously before doing her best to compose herself. "All patients to your rooms," she ordered, and I complied. I wheeled back and quickly shut the door, feeling a bit like a child being scolded for stealing candy. I was shocked. I had just had dinner with Jen last night. She had seemed fine, or as fine as any of us are. "Hannah," the raspy voice of Beth, my roommate, called out. She was about my age, in her mid-30s, with scraggly hair and sallow skin. She wheezed as she spoke, a tank of oxygen dutifully by her side. She looked wild as she continued. "Hannah, we need to talk." She, too, was in a wheelchair. She rolled up to me. "I saw something horrible." She coughed uncontrollably before continuing. "Jen didn't die of natural causes. One of the nurses killed her." I let out a gasp. I was shocked at her claim. It seemed outlandish, but Beth had no reason to lie to me. We had grown close in our time together. "What? How?" I said breathlessly. "I saw one of the nurses smother Jen with a pillow last night," she said, nervously looking over her shoulder, as if somehow the culprit might pounce out of one of the corners in the tiny room. Why would they do that?" I asked. "I have a theory," Beth said. "I couldn't sleep all night, but was too afraid to wake you, so I just pretended to be sleeping. I spent hours looking for a motive, and I think I found one. You know how the staff keep complaining that the ward doesn't have enough rooms?" She waited for my nod. "I think they made room." I cringed away from her, but she grabbed my arm. "Think about it. Without new patients, the hospital goes under. If you think about it, Jen was the perfect person to kill. She doesn't have a relationship with any of her siblings, and she was very vocal about it. No one to mourn her. Nobody to ask questions. And God knows, she was a difficult woman. A miserable soul." I was doubtful, but Beth strengthened the argument. "I bet you that within a fortnight, that room is filled. Just you watch." And she was right. An old woman named Bessie took up the room. What was even more odd, the staff showed no signs of sadness. Well, except for once. A newer nurse was showing signs of distress. She didn't notice me. Neither did the other nurse, as she swept down on her. "Keep up pretenses," she hissed. "If your mask is going to slip, then walk off the ward. You knew what you were getting into." That was when the first nurse noticed me. She gave the other nurse a nudge, and they both faced me with big smiles on their faces. Big, fake smiles on their faces. They tried to make pleasantries with me, and I pretended as if nothing was wrong, but my trust for the nursing staff was gone. One night, Beth had gone ashen. I overheard some of the nurses. "Oh God, it's horrible, Hannah. They're planning to kill again." My blood turned to ice as she said this, but she didn't stop there. They said that they were going to clean out room 47B. I almost passed out. That was our room. "When?" I said urgently. "Tonight," she said, tearfully. I didn't waste any time. I wheeled to the communal phones and dialed 911, only to get a buzzing sound from the line. "Hannah?" I heard a sickly sweet voice call out from behind me. "Now what do you think you're doing? The phone shut off at 9. I turned in my chair to see one of the nurses staring down at me. I didn't think. I only reacted. I slammed my wheelchair straight into her legs. She crumpled with a cry of pain. I went as fast as I could and made it to my room before slamming the door. I could hear footsteps running in my direction. "Beth!" I screamed. "Beth, help me! Hold the door!" I could hear the nurses talking, but what they said surprised me. "Damn it! Beth is back. Get the doctor." Beth and I looked at each other confused. What did they mean? She was back. "Hannah?" A male voice called gently through the door. "This is Dr. Perry. Hannah, you are safe. Please open the door." "No!" I screamed. "Beth heard your little plan. You're going to kill us, just like you killed Jen." "Hannah," he said, "Beth isn't real. She is a hallucination." I looked over at Beth to share a look of disbelief at this comment. At least I tried to. Where Beth had been sitting moments ago was nothing but empty space. "Hannah," the doctor continued, "you have schizophrenia. It's why you're here." "No," I cried. "My legs, they don't work." "Yes. You were paralyzed when you drove into a crowded street and hit the side of a building." I felt dizzy. "But Jen, you killed her." "No," he said. "Jen killed herself. She was manic depressive, remember?" And I did. I couldn't stop crying. I let go of the door and orderlies rushed in with a sedative in hand, shooting me up before I could do anything else. I saw the newer nurse trying to hide a look of horror. "You're doing better," another nurse told her. "Just keep practicing a smile. After all, this is nothing. Just another day at Brentworth Hospital for the criminally insane." "There you are, my dear." I breathed a sigh of relief as I finally spotted her through my binocular lenses. She was moving slowly, her naked body covered in dirt and ravaged by thorns and branches. I approached as quietly as I could, never taking my eyes off her. Although she didn't know this forest like I did, she was heading right for civilization. If she spotted me, there was a chance she could sprint away to where someone would see her. The next few minutes were agonizing. Panic rose into my chest as she drew ever closer to the clearing. I quickened my pace, foregoing stealth as the situation became critical. Her head snapped around as I rushed toward her. Our eyes locked, and she let out a piercing shriek, stumbling forward and crashing through the brush. Only 100 yards ahead, the branches thinned, and the early morning sunrise was shining on a farmhouse. I could not let her escape. I loved her too much to let her get away. The net stopped her dead in her tracks, pulling her down to the forest floor. Her screaming echoed around us, sure to alert someone of her presence if I didn't act fast. "Sorry, love, I can't let you go," I muttered, dragging her through the trees and doing my best to stifle her wailing. By the time I finally made it home, she still hadn't lit up her racket. Not that it mattered. There was no one around to hear her now. "Let's get you inside," I said, looking her filthy body over. She looked back at me with rage in her eyes, but I was used to this by now. I didn't let it bother me much. It took a lot of effort to get her back in her restraints in the basement. She tried to bite and scratch the whole time, but I was finally able to get her collar and shackles secured. Don't you ever scare me like that again, I scolded, before I retreated upstairs to the kitchen. I walked past framed pictures of us during simpler days, hand in hand, smiling and in love, so blissfully unaware of the bleak future ahead of us. The outbreak changed everything. Thousands of people were infected within weeks, exhibiting aggressive behavior and a craving for human flesh. The government stepped in quickly, slaughtering the infected to prevent the spread, and to their credit, they were successful in reducing the infection rate. These days, sightings are rare, and they are dealt with swiftly. I made my way back down the steps, her wild eyes fixed on the raw meat in my hands, foaming at the mouth and desperately pulling at her restraints. I tossed it toward her and watched as she tore it ravenously, blood splattering the walls and dripping down her chin. "Happy anniversary, Sarah," I whispered. My 11-year-old daughter has taken up a new hobby, picture taking. Lena has become quite the photographer. Ever since I showed her how to use a camera last year, she has taken pictures of everything. In the last few months, she has been taking pictures of strangers. Whenever we go out, Lena would ask someone or a group of people if she can take a picture of them. If they agreed, she wanted them to pose and smile. As innocent of a hobby this is, what was odd was what she did with the pictures after. Lena would get the pictures printed in various sizes and frame them. To add, she would hang these pictures all over our house. It was odd to look at them as I would walk around our home. The only thing I asked was that no pictures be hung in my room. After a while, I got used to all the pictures on the walls. One night, I wake up with the urge to drink a glass of water. Lena always sleeps with the door open, so I decided to leave the lights off so I won't wake her. I walk to the kitchen and grab a glass from the kitchen cabinet. I head over to the water dispenser in our fridge. As I fill the glass with water, I look around. There is something about the dark that makes everything look creepy. With the lights off, these pictures looked terrifying. The smiles in the pictures looked sinister. As my attention is consumed by the photos, I feel water on my hand. The glass is overflowing and I am making a mess on the floor. I place the glass on the kitchen counter, grab a few paper towels and clean the mess. As I get back up from cleaning, a picture catches my attention. This one was big. It must be new. I get closer. I leave the lights off as I observe it. The photo is of a person just standing there. They are smiling. Every other photo had some life to it. This one was different. This one felt different. It drew me in. I turn away from the picture to grab my glass of water and make my way back to the picture. As I return, something didn't seem right. With that same smile on their face, their head is now tilted. I didn't notice that before. If that's not weird enough, the background looked familiar. This thought kept me staring. I look around the photo. Then, fear strikes me, as I continue looking at the background of the picture. I notice my shed. I notice my backyard. From that realization, I notice something else. This isn't a picture on my wall. This is my window. I got called to my daughter's school today. Seems she'd been expelled from kindergarten. I spoke with the principal briefly, then took Ellie home. Her teacher agreed to wait after school for me to come talk to her. I found her alone in her classroom, so we sat at one of the short little kid-sized tables and began to talk. She told me that in all her years as a teacher, she'd never seen anything like it. Ellie had always been such a sweet little girl, but, well, what she'd seen today had been beyond the pale, and she hadn't known what else she could have done. The first incident happened in the morning. She stepped into her classroom closet to retrieve some art supplies. When she came back out, all of the students in her class were standing up and twirling themselves around, sort of like little ballerinas, except for Ellie. Ellie had been sitting at her desk and twirling her finger around in the air, watching her classmates with amusement. That had struck her as very odd, but thought perhaps it had been some sort of group prank. She shrugged it off and continued with the class. Right after lunch, though, things had sort of taken a turn. One she and the principal had agreed merited Ellie's expulsion. Granted, they didn't understand it, but under the circumstances they hadn't known what else they could have done. They had to think of the safety of the other children. Ellie's teacher told me she'd stepped into their little in-class bathroom for just a second to wash her hands. When she came out, no one was in the room but Ellie. She'd been sitting at her table, using the first 2 fingers of her hand to imitate walking. Like her hand was a little puppet, traipsing across the tabletop. Ellie's teacher said she'd felt panicked right away, but then there'd come a loud screeching sound, like tires from the nearby street, followed immediately by several thunderous crashes. She and several of her colleagues ran outside together and saw a horrifying sight. Ellie's teacher's students had crawled over the playground fence and marched straight into the street, into the heavy traffic there, causing a massive pile-up. Fortunately, none of the children had been injured, but after a lengthy discussion, they'd agreed that the best course for now was to expel little Ellie. I'd heard enough. I thanked her for her time, and then reached into my purse and pulled out the little pistol I always carry. I laid it on the table as I stood, and then used my hand to mimic shooting myself in the head as I left the classroom. By the time I'd made it to the side door, I heard the shot resonate through the halls. I was beside myself as I drove home, savouring everything I'd just been told. Little Ellie was coming of age. I can't wait to tell her father. He'll be so proud. Stepping out the door into the fresh spring air, my mother called me over to where she was planting bulbs in the garden. "Visiting your father again?" she asked, squinting against the morning sun. She was a beautiful woman, in spite of, or perhaps because of, the scars she carried. "Yes," I replied, "but then I'm going for a walk. I'll be back soon enough." "Jin," she said, worry creasing her face. "It's okay, Mum," I said, smiling until her features softened and she returned to her garden. I passed through the small town quickly and found myself staring down at my father's grave. This year's new growth was just poking through, and I wondered at the cycles in life. My father had been a tortured soul, and he'd wrestled with the demons he'd been given. I know he'd done his best, but sometimes even life's best defenses can't stymie the flow of violence that rushes from one generation to the next. I reflexively cradled my arm. Shaking off the reverie, I walked to the edge of the forest. Most stayed away because of the reputation it had. It was known as a suicide forest. Regardless of what people thought of it or defined it, it was sacred. I felt that reverence with each mossy footstep, and through the stillness of the air, which carried neither birdsong nor the buzzing of insects. Just a few 100 meters in, I caught sight of the first shadowy form hanging from the branches. I stood, looking at the dehydrated husk of a man. Praying for his soul, I moved on. Soon, like a curtain in some macabre theatre, a line of hanging bodies spread out before me. I hesitated, but pushed through. I'd heard whispers in town what performance awaited me, but because I'd never witnessed it, felt nervous. The further I walked into the forest, the fresher the bodies became until, at the heart of the wood, only sacks hung from the branches. One in particular bulged, pregnant with what it held inside. I knew this was the one to watch. It hung from a thick cord and was shaped like a teardrop. The red veins which ran throughout were vascular and pulsed rhythmically. The whole pod moved, and at times sharp forms pushed against the belly. Then, suddenly, a palm with 5 fingers dug through. In a rush of fluids, a fully formed man burst out. The cord wrapped tightly around his neck, broke his fall, and he clutched at it. I stared into my father's bulging eyes as he grappled against the strangling vine. I watched him until his pupils had rolled all the way back into his purple face and he swung silently. I sat there, contemplating for a while if I'd thought he'd been punished enough. No, came a whisper from deep within. So, I cut down his body to bury him once more in the cemetery, so that he may, again, be taken by the forest. My sister Megan's always been obsessed with Disney princesses. Every Halloween she dressed up as a different Disney princess. For Christmas, she asked for limited edition Disney princess dolls. Once, she even asked our parents to legally change her name to Aurora. Her fascination continued long after we were all grown up. Anytime Megan and I got together, she'd insist on going to see some Disney remake or musical together, and no family gathering was complete without her off-key rendition of a classic Disney tune. It was annoying at times, but we all accepted it as just a harmless quirk. We never expected anything dangerous to come of it. Nothing like what happened with our sister-in-law. Our brother Eric's fiancée, Elsa, was stunning. Originally from Sweden, she was the stereotypical blonde, blue-eyed Scandinavian beauty with creamy skin and a tall, willowy figure. As Eric explained to us, Elsa is a fairly common name in that part of the world. It wasn't a huge coincidence that she had the same name as the Frozen character. But Megan quickly became obsessed with her. Anytime Eric brought Elsa over for family events, Megan would stare and stare at her, making everyone uncomfortable. Poor Elsa most of all. And she wouldn't stop gushing about Elsa to anyone who'd listen, about her pretty dresses, her elegant mannerisms, and her regal demeanor. Like a real-life Disney princess, she breathed. Megan wasn't invited to the wedding. It wasn't a personal slight. At least, Eric swore it wasn't. They just ran into last-minute logistical issues, and ended up having a downsized wedding in Sweden, where most of us couldn't make it anyway. But I could tell Megan was really, really upset. She unfriended Elsa on Facebook, which, for her, was a big deal, as she loved to keep tabs on our entire extended family. The two of them didn't meet again until months after the wedding, at our parents' annual Christmas party. Surprisingly, everything seemed fine. Megan greeted Elsa warmly, and soon enough they started chatting like real sisters. The booze flowed freely, stories were swapped, and everyone was having a good time. As the guests started to leave, Eric started asking if anyone had seen his wife. No one had. Not for a while, and several of us started looking for her together. Megan didn't get involved in the search. I figured it was just because she felt awkward about the previous drama between her and Elsa. But as we passed by her, she made an odd remark. The cold never bothered her anyway, she said, and laughed. We didn't know what that meant. Not until a guest opened our parents' extra-large freezer in the basement and discovered Elsa's frozen corpse. She was bound and gagged. The gag had slipped loose, and she died screaming. Unfortunately, no one had heard her over the sound of Megan's shrill rendition of Let It Go. I sit in darkness, on the floor just off the entryway. The grandfather clock says it's 11:09. It'll happen soon, just like last year, like every year. Thunder rumbles through the unshattered windows. The sky is clear. A full moon shines like a spotlight into the spacious foyer. 11:10. I look to the door on the opposite side of the hall. Anxiety swells in my chest. The door opens of its own accord. The sound of footsteps and scraping echo against the vaulted ceiling. I can't see anything, but I don't need to. I know who's there. I know what she's doing. I stand up. "Mum!" I yell. "What are you doing? It's 11 at night. That can wait until tomorrow." Her voice mumbles, but it's not directed at me. I know the litany well. No one does anything around here. I'm the only one who cares. This place would go to pieces without me. "Mom, it isn't safe." The scraping stops, and now I can see the shape of the rickety ladder. After 20 years, it's rotted in some places, shuddering on its uneven feet. "Mum, please." Tears stream down my face. "I said I'd help you in the morning. Please, just wait. Why won't you wait?" The ladder rocks as an invisible force begins to climb. The sound of rain against glass swells as the silhouette reaches the top. "Mum!" I scream. I'm tempted to run into the foyer, an audience member invading the stage. But I know better. I've tried it before. "Mum, please, you're going to get yourself killed." She doesn't listen. She never listens. Or maybe she can't hear. It doesn't matter which. The figure reaches toward the chandelier and mimics unscrewing a light bulb. There's nothing there to grasp. The light hasn't been replaced since it happened. At the apex of her reach, when the ladder wobbles under her, the thunder booms. The windows rattle, the walls shake. The sound resounds inside my chest. My mother jerks in surprise. The ladder rocks. I don't see the fall. Tears blur everything into shadows and silver, but I hear the impact. I sink to my knees, grief tearing through my heart, spasming through my body. When I can't shed another tear, I collapse onto the floor and wait. Eventually, the light changes. Gold diffuses the silver. Outside, birds trill. Still exhausted, I rise. I wish I could sleep, but I can't. I haven't for a long time. Instead, I walk. Dust lays thick on the carpet, but I leave no footprints. I know every inch of this place, every goddamn inch. I want to leave. I don't enjoy this pantomime. The guilt tethers me here, cursed to relieve my greatest regret over and over, trapped in a parallel purgatory. If I just let go of the guilt, I'll be free. Or maybe things will be different next year. Daddy? I'm in a dreamless sleep, but I hear the word. The significance of the word escapes me. I'm exhausted. It's been months since I've had a full night's sleep. Daddy. It calls again. The word is louder now. The voice behind the word is worried and a little scared. I'm just awake enough to know that I need to wake up. I open my eyes and try to convince myself that I'm dreaming, but I know that I'm not. Every night this child wakes me up. Where I sleep doesn't matter. Outdoors, hotels, hospitals, the location makes no difference at all. Somehow, she finds me. Daddy! It's a little girl's voice, high and shrill, and she's scared. Just a second. I call back. The routine is the same every night, but it doesn't get easier. How could it? How could this ever be normal? I sit up in bed and reach for my glasses. Then I stop. No glasses. It's easier if I can't see the details. I'm coming. I call again and slide into my slippers. For the 100th time, I ask, why is this my responsibility? Why did she choose me? I am not her father. I'm not anyone's father. My thoughts are still undisciplined, and for a moment, I think about the child's mother. It's too much. It's just too much. I feel cold. I start to shake. The shake progresses to heaving shudders, and I don't try to fight it. It's easier if my body has time to convulse. I let my body have this small moment of rebellion before I force it to stand. My body is numb, and I am thankful. Diligently, I place one foot in front of the other. My legs are heavy, head down. I have to focus on my steps not to fall. There is pressure in the back of my head, and that means she can see me. I raise my head. I'm standing in the doorway of my guest room. The door is open, as usual. The lamp beside the bed is on, as usual. The figure is in the center of the bed, holding a stuffed bunny, as usual. I kept calling and you didn't come, the figure says. I have a hard time waking up, I say, and force myself to walk into the room. What time is it? 312, she says. The shrill of fear has gone from her voice, and I am thankful. I've started to think of it as she. It has a little girl's voice, high, piercing, and innocent in a way that I can't explain. How long have I thought of it as a girl? I bend down and squint at the bedside clock. 3:12, I say. 3:12, she repeats. I get that wrong sometimes. It takes practice. I'm sure you will get it, I say, and smile down at the child. She trills happily and hugs her stuffed bunny. Are you warm enough? Yes. Would you like me to get you some water? No. My throat goes rough as I ask. Is it time to go to Mummy's room? Yes, she says from behind her bunny. I force myself to hold out my hand, and cool, smooth scales press gently into my palm. Then I stifle a shudder as innumerable scaled tendrils wrap themselves around my wrist and forearm. The child's form writhes as it raises from the bed. I can see the movement, but the details are blurry, and I am thankful. Could you turn on the light? She asks when we enter the hallway. Her request is so genuine it surprises me. How could something like her be afraid of the dark? I turn on the hallway light and briefly wonder if I should purchase a flashlight for her. We walk. The child is silent. Her current form conceals much of her sharp edges and power, but occasionally a claw or spine grates against my leg. She is coiled and prepared to attack. It's all right. We're almost there. I try to reassure her, but her grip still tightens on my arm. We find ourselves in the kitchen. The pull of gravity is less here, and I adjust my steps into a shuffle. We are close to Mummy's door. The door to Mummy's room is in a different location every night. The basement, the linen closet, the couch, and a filing cabinet have all been doors to Mummy's room. The shape of the door does not matter. The door has been broad, narrow, crooked, or straight. It has been curved or flat. When the door is curved or spherical, I close my eyes. It's easier that way. This night, the door to Mummy's room is in the pantry. The ceiling, the food, and the walls are gone, but the floor remains. We walk forward and stand in the middle of a galaxy. my kitchen visible through the aperture of the pantry door. I reminded myself that it was good that I didn't bring my glasses, as I stand in the center of a blurry night sky. I feel the mother's presence. Large tentacled masses distort the light around us. The mother is a titan, a force that existed before gods, and her child is holding my hand. The child's hold loosens, and I prepare myself for what comes next. I will my muscles to relax as she wraps her small sinus form around me in a sharp hug. She is home, and I am thankful. "Good night, Daddy," she says as she peels her many limbs away from me. "Good night, little one," I reply. She hands me her bunny and floats towards a writhing mass of stars. I stand watch until she joins her mother. The stars fade, and I am now in the pantry, surrounded by spices and cleaning supplies. I feel gravity return. I step too quickly and stumble back into the kitchen. My legs shake, and I steady myself by grasping the counter. It's just too much. I scream until I'm out of breath. Then I return to the guest room. I place the bunny on the bed and tuck it in. The child will want it when she returns. My responsibility is over for the night. Tomorrow, she will wake me. I will comfort her and turn on the lights and help her be brave. Then we will walk to Mummy's room, and she will leave me. We will do this again and again, night after night, until I can no longer wake up.